Okay, good morning.
Good
morning, Jeff.
So this is like Buddha sitting with Buddhas, right? It truly is, right? So, Sensei Carl usually gives the talks, and I figured we probably could use a break. So I offered to do this. A couple of things. So the theme of this talk is going to be on the Bodhisattva vows. And it's actually just going to be on the first Bodhisattva vow, which is creations are numberless. I vow to free them. And the beauty of that vow is the impossibility of it, right? To a certain extent, it is and it isn't impossible. Depends how you look at it. But it's about making that commitment, and that commitment to sort of sacrificing, becoming no self, and hanging out there to teach. That's what it's really all about. So really, what I'd encourage you to do, like actually sort of doing this exercise of doing a talk, right, is a really good exercise for developing and deepening your own practice, because anybody that's been a teacher, and I hear from this time and again, that you learn like the most by actually having to teach others, right? Because you have to get such a deep understanding of the subject matter. So in preparing for this, I looked at two things really that I'm going to encourage you to take a look at. One is sort of the Bodhisattva vows, a short article on the Bodhisattva vows from Lion's Roar from 2016, written by Changpa Trungpa Rinpoche, who's a very famous Tibetan master. And so I'm going to email that out on the email thing, and sort of I'm going to encourage you to take a look at that. And the other thing that I looked at in preparing for this talk was the Genjo Koan. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The Genjo Koan is a very famous statement, sort of a summary of the work of Dogen, whose name I'm sure you've heard many, many times. So even though Dogen, wrote, many, many years ago, probably I think in the 14th century, his writing is actually very modern. It has a lot of vitality to it, and it's also very poetic. But one of the things in the Genjo Koan that Dogen says is, and this is a very famous expression, but it's to study the way, which means to study this particular way, to study the way of meditation, is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be open to all the things in the universe. So I'm going to encourage you to look at both the Genjo Koan as well as that article. And then I'm going to also suggest to you that you teach that, okay? And that you teach it to your cat, if your cat's around, or you teach it to your your dog, or you teach it to a plant if neither one of those will listen to you, and that you practice your teaching. You find something in there that you would like to learn about, and that you would feel comfortable enough to teach, and that you then practice teaching it. So I think that sometimes these teachings sort of are manifest in some stories. So I'm just going to sort of tell you a short story. It's actually not a story; it's true, but I think it's a beautiful representation of selflessness, and that the Bodhisattva way doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to study Zen to be a Bodhisattva. So I have some friends, and they not have children. So they adopted two children. They adopted a boy, they adopted a girl. And when the children grew up, the son had a lot of problems. It was not easy for him. And he eventually left home and lived a very sort of wandering, vagabond type of life. Got himself into a lot of trouble, minor crimes, and things like that. And eventually, he also got mixed up with alcohol and drugs and things like that. And eventually, he ended up overdosing on drugs, and he died. And that was a few years ago. A few months after he died, my friends received a note from a woman in Kentucky, and she said that she had been living with their son, and that she was pregnant with his child. And so, and she didn't necessarily, I don't think in the letter, ask for anything in particular, but she let them know that they now had this grandchild, and so so they had to decide, well, what are we going to do in this situation? Do we open up our hearts to this grandchild? Do we close our hearts to this child? What kind of relationship do we have with this child? So, being who they are, being the sort of unselfish people who they are, they opened up their hearts to this child and also the mother, who they really didn't know. And so this mother, really had no family. She also came from probably a very poor family, was not an educated woman, didn't really, have any kind of skills, very, very basic kind of skills, things like that. Really had no job, was then living in a relationship with another man, and probably, somewhat typical sort of, abusive type of relationship. And, they decided that they were going to involve themselves in this child's life and in the life of this woman. And that's what they did. And so over time, they helped out a lot. They helped with material things for the child, like clothing and toys, and getting them involved in an experience like going to a daycare center that the child couldn't otherwise afford. They helped the mother. Supported the mother. And I just don't mean financially, but also, helped give her some sense of a better sense of herself, and so she could move on from some of these relationships. And eventually, so I had never really met, the child before. Let's call him, let's call him John. So I never really had met John before, and she had, in the last week, she had brought him up from Kentucky to be with her and her husband, and also invite him to invite the larger family and friends, to gather around and to sort of welcome him. And so yesterday was this big event at her house where the child was, he was there, and everybody came, and gifts and other things like that, for him. And he was this beautiful, beautiful little boy. He was so happy and ebullient and out there, and and he was like he would run up to you and things like that. He was not shy or withdrawn or anything. Beautiful blue eyes, long curly blonde hair. I was very jealous. And it was like, it was this beautiful experience, and and here's this little being that sort of really had his choice was a very, very deprived kind of a life. I felt being out there stuck with just a mom in Kentucky in very, very difficult situations, or being welcomed into this huge, they know a lot of people that have a big family, being welcomed into this huge family with people, and so that's the choice that they made, and that's the choice that this child's on. And it's fascinating. You don't know what's going to evolve here. Like what it's like it's an evolving event. So they're going to bring the child back to the mom this coming week, and continue this relationship. But you wonder, like, it's just a beautiful thing. And to me, that's a really, really beautiful expression of what being a bodhisattva, is. The world will throw something at you, and then how do you deal with it? I mean, do you bring it in and love it and take care of it? Do you stay away from it? Do you approach it with fear and loathing, or how? And this practice, I think, even though they don't practice, they are, religious, but they don't do this practice. But I think this practice prepares you for dealing with that kind of a situation, in a way that's both non-self and loving. And that's sort of, one of the goals of this practice. I think, or not one of the goals, but one of the fruits of the practice. It's actually a fruit of the practice. So, in the just leave you with a couple of things. In the Bodhisattva path, right? The Bodhisattva practice is the 6 paramitas, right? And the 6 paramitas are discipline, exertion, generosity, patience, meditation, and wisdom, or in the article that Chungpa Rinpoche wrote, he calls it transcendental knowledge. I like the phrase wisdom better than transcendental knowledge. I think it's easier for my Western mind to wrap around. But those are 6 beautiful paramitas to work with, and they're all important, right? You've got to have discipline. It means you've got to come and you've got to sit on a regular basis. Maybe not every day, but to try to have the discipline to sit regularly. You've got to exert yourself, right? If you don't, you've got to, really make an effort at this. It doesn't come naturally. And you've also got to be generous. Generosity takes many forms. Some of it is making donations to support the Zendo. Others are all the different ways that you give. You give of yourself. How generous can you be? How giving can you be? Patience is really, meditation obviously, is what we do, and that's critical in the paramitas. And meditation obviously takes different forms. This is our form of meditation. Patience. Patience is something we see less and less of in the world we live in because of the frenzied nature of our life in this type of a society. But it's really important to cultivate. And then, of course, wisdom, which is sort of the fruit of all of these things. Very last thing I'm going to say about this today. So, there were a couple of teachings last time Sensei gave the teaching. He said, you remember the story where Roshi Shunru Suzuki was giving a talk like this in the San Francisco Zen Center, and a student raised his hand and said, Roshi, what is, can you summarize Zen, and what is Zen? And so everyone laughed, and Suzuki Roshi laughed, and then he thought about it, and he said, well, Zen is everything changes, right? So I thought that was a good, statement from Suzuki, but I wasn't completely satisfied with that statement. And there's another story where a student asks the Zen master, can you tell what's in one word, what is meditation, what is Zen? And in that story, the teacher says, pay attention. He says, is that all? And then he goes to pay attention. Can you say anything else about it? He says, pay attention. So that's it. So again, not completely satisfied with that explanation. So what do we do in the modern world, right? You consult ChatGPT. So I said to ChatGPT, Tell me in one sentence, what is the essence of Zen? So ChatGPT says in one sentence. It says, the direct experience of reality without words, concepts, or attachments, which I really like. Because that's really, to me, that's what it is. It's learning how to experience reality directly without words, concepts, or attachments. And so here we are in a Zendo, trying to practice experiencing reality directly without words, concepts, or attachments. Zen, that's the Zen part of it. And the Do part of it is way, right? Do means way, way of Zen. When we come in here, this is a special space. But everywhere you go, when you begin to experience reality directly without words, concepts, and attachments, this is Zendo. Because the opportunity for practice and experiencing in that manner exists wherever, whether you're on the bus, at work, being with children, and so forth. Anyway, thank you. Oh, and one other thing. So this is a bottle cap, which you can find in any form of tea, iced tea. This happened from iced tea. So talking about, giving a talk, it says, difficulties are things that show a person what they are.